Okay, in this video here, we're going to look at a case study, some student work that's in kind of the design development phase, and where it's going to lead us to in the building code is section 328, which is mezzanines and openings through floor areas. So in this example here, which I'll explain in a second, the desire is to have an opening through a floor area. So we'll have to come back to that section to take a look at it. So just to give a little bit of context to what this project is, so on the main floor of this building right here that we're looking at, there's one retail unit there, one there, and one there, and there's a cafe in this corner over here. And so I've highlighted the cafe area in orange here. So as you'll see, there's a stair within that cafe, and the reason for that is they want to have a second floor cafe space up here, so you can grab your coffee and whatever, your muffin or whatever you're having, and you could make your way upstairs to a quieter area, presumably, to enjoy those things. Now, again, this is in design development, still being worked on, so there'll be an access door through here so that people that need to use the elevator to get up there can access that space, and if needed, then of course, and we'll look into this, there's also a possibility for an exit right there. And so what the desire is, it'd be nice, if you're in this cafe, you don't want to have to go through an enclosed stair. You could do it in sprinkler protected glazing or fire rated glazing or something like that, but probably we can get away with not having a wall around that stair at all in this case. So that's kind of what we're going to look at today. Is it possible to take the fire rating away from the stair and just have it as an open stair so that it's very visible and very accessible for people, to draw them up to that second floor? That's kind of the point of the video today. And I'll just finish with the context of this. Here's the site plan. So, like I said, if it's still being worked on, there'll probably be more glass on this wall. This door is probably better suited over here because presumably this is the back service corridor. So the back of house space would be probably here. Public space would be up here. You're doubling up on the vestibule situation here, which is a good idea for a small space. You don't want to eat up your space with a vestibule in here, and also in the wintertime when the doors open, you don't want big wafts of freezing cold air coming in and chilling the patrons sitting at tables and stuff like that. So that's a smart move right there. The reason I say maybe this door is better off down here is because this is in this case the north is facing this way. Which is okay for a cafe. So I was going to say patio space right here on the north side is probably not ideal, but because it's a coffee shop type scenario, it does make sense that it could do well there, because in the morning time your sun's actually coming in from this direction and this direction and this direction. So there's some good potential here for some good morning patio space. Now, before we get into determining whether we can open that stair up or not and have an opening through a floor area, let's just take a look at a quick review, kind of high level of have other exiting needs been met in this building. Now, I'm not going to crunch numbers and all this kind of stuff, but just this is a general overview of what one should be looking for. Okay, so let's just take a look at the main floor here. And in this retail unit here, this retailer would have their own exit out the front right there, and then they have their back exit as well. So in this scenario, assuming we need 2 points of exit from the space, again, that would depend on occupant load and travel distances and things like this, but let's just assume you needed those. If you had 100 people in this space, for example, then 50 will go out the front, 50 will go out the back. And so where that's coming from is 3421, pretty much starts off telling you that every floor area intended for occupancy shall be served by 2 exits, so that'd be a floor area. There is a criteria for 1 exit, so you certainly could look at that and see if you can get away with 1 exit, but usually you have the back exit anyways. So in that case, let's assume you need 2. And then if we cruise ahead to 3432 under your exit width, if you read sentence 7, if more than 1 exit is required, so let's just assume that those 2 exits were required from that space, then every exit shall be considered as contributing not more than 1/2 the required exit width. So in a nutshell, that's what that basically means is if you had 100 people here, you'd assume 50 out the front, 50 out the back. So obviously if they go out the back, then you'd have to check to see where they're going. So they'd enter this corridor here, and they got a door right here, so that'd be fine. They can get out that way. So probably that's okay. That probably checks out. The second retail space, so this could get subdivided into two spaces, but they do have the front access points and then a back access point. So that's good. Now you'd have to check distance between exits is met, but presumably would be, and you could assume that if these two were far enough apart and so on and so forth, then you could assume 1/3 the occupants out of each one of these doors. Essentially, this retail unit right here, half that way, so that looks to be fine. Now again, and when you think about the exiting of say there's 50 here, 50 here, and 50 here, let's just say for easy numbers, you'd have 150 people. Now they're all going to be sharing this corridor and this exit door on the exterior. So you'd have to multiply that 150 people by 6.1. Okay, so you're taking the occupant load and you're multiplying it by 8.1 or 6.1 in this case. And so actually, if that was the actual number, oddly enough, 150 times 6.1 gives you 950 millimeters. So this door here would have to have 950 millimeters clear for that to meet code, basically based on occupant load. So that's pretty tight. If you put in a metric door, it's only going to be 900 wide. If you put in an imperial door at 3 feet, you're going to be 915. But you also have door stops in there, which eat into that. So in this case, I would go to one door size bigger, or do a set of double doors there to the exterior, which probably is better. I guess they're loading from the interior, but I was going to say it could be good for loading as well. It is possible that you could say, well, some of the exit capacity could go that way, but then you got to deal with painting off the floor and stuff, and dealing with other stuff if you exit through a corridor. So the likelihood would be, the best scenario would be to deal with it right there. Okay, so that, anyways, the exiting on the main floor seems to check out. The cafe's got couple of options here, so that's fine. Actually got a few options there. It doesn't look like there's any issues there. We'll just head up to the second floor here and see what's happening right here. So a couple of office spaces. So if we start with the office on the top here, this could be subdivided, but let's just say it was going to be all one unit like it is. Then you would again calculate your occupant load for this space, and you would start to check how many egress doors you require from this office space. And if we just go to that part of the code, 3315, it tells you that you need a minimum of 2 egress doorways from a suite, but then it talks about, well, maybe you can get away with 1. Okay, so looking at the size of that space without crunching numbers, it looks like probably it needs the 2. And again, that would just be based on occupant loads and travel distances and things like that. So let's just assume it does need the 2 egresses from that suite. And knowing it needs 2, then they got to be placed at a certain distance apart from each other. Okay, so you'd have to read that sentence right there. So that would be 33152 would tell you they got to be placed at a distance from one another equal to or greater than 1/3 the maximum overall diagonal dimension of the area to be served. So basically, you would probably take a look at this one and say, well, my diagonal dimension in this case, it's a little bit gray, but maybe you say it's like that, and you would take 1/3 of that, okay? Or you might want to check it this way as well, just to play it safe. You could check that dimension and just make sure that these doors are at least 1/3 of that larger diagonal dimension, basically, is kind of the idea. So we'll just assume that that works. This student would have to check that out, but it looks like it's probably okay. And then, of course, you also want to check travel distances within the suite to that egress door. And you always want some fluff, because we're showing it as an empty space, but once there's offices in there and cubicles and all that kind of stuff, the path of travel for that travel distance is around all that stuff. So you just have to be conscious of that and make sure that you're not cutting it too close so that the suite can't easily be fitted out, basically. And then for the travel distance, really what that is sentence 3316, and it just refers you to another part of the code. And if we went to this part of the code here, if we went to that part of the code, I think it would be for business and personal services. If you're not sprinklered, 40 meters. If you're sprinklered, it looks like 45 meters. So, I would say in this case, they have no issues at all looking at this. But you would certainly prove that through, you know, your code plans, what the travel distances would be. And I guess what I'm saying is, if it turned out that, say, this dimension right here, let's just say you did this as a path of travel to that door, if that was 45 meters, then you got a problem, because by the time you put in offices and cubicles and stuff, that path of travel might be like, you know, this or something, right? And then you exceed it. So you always want to make sure you're a good 15-20% below that maximum travel distance, so that the space can easily be fitted out and still meet code. But anyways, that checks out, you know, on the same kind of rationale would exist for this unit on the other side of the corridor as well. Something else I would check on the second floor is the number and location of exits from floor areas. So again, this is, except per some sentences, every floor area intended for occupancy shall be served by 2 exits. So and then if you go on it, there is possibilities of doing 1 exit. But if we go back to this space, you would probably need 2 exits in this scenario. And here's one over here, and here's one over here. The other thing I would check here is 3313 in your means of egress. If you go down to sentence number 7, at the point where a doorway referred to in sentence 8, and sentence 8 is talking about a doorway that goes from a suite into a public corridor, which is exactly what we have. We have doorways from suites into a public corridor. Then sentence 9 is telling us that where that doorway opens into that public corridor, it shall be possible to go in opposite directions to each of 2 separate exits. Okay, so let's just take a look at that. We come out this door here, and we have the option of going this way to an exit, and we have the option of going this way to an exit, so that's good. And same would exist for all these other doors, so that checks out as well. And again, though, you'd have to check travel distance now from the suite door. You'd have to check your travel distances to the exits and make sure they don't exceed the maximums. And I can tell just by looking at this plan that it's fine, but let's just take a look at that. And that took us right back to the article that the egress door situation took us to. So if it was a sprinkler building, in this case, it'd be 45 meters. So, you know, looking at this, you know, from these egress doors, you're not going more than 45 meters. And the reason you're allowed to take that measurement, that 45 meters, not say from the farthest corner, let's just say maybe this is the farthest corner, the travel distance of 45 meters isn't like that in this case. It could be sometimes if there was no public corridor, it would be, but when you have the public corridor meeting certain requirements, you know, you have the egress door travel distance requirement, but then you have another travel distance requirement from that egress door. And where I'm getting that from is from 3424 sentence 2. The travel distance from a suite or a room, not within a suite, is permitted to be measured from the egress door of the suite or room to the nearest exit, provided the suite, or the suite and has a fire separation from the public corridor and blah, blah, blah. There's some requirements there, but we'll assume that in this case, that corridor is going to meet those requirements. But certainly something you would check and make sure is accounted for in your building code summary and design of your space. So anyways, you know, in summary of that, just, you know, the quick check of our egress and exiting scenario in this building, everything seems to be in order. Again, all those fine details would have to be flushed out, but from a higher level, it looks like everything is satisfied here. I don't see a dead-end corridor situation either. So, you know, there is a danger of a dead-end corridor here. Like if you were exiting this way, you don't want to overshoot this door by too much, like run past it basically. And so that magic number is 6 meters. You can't be more than 6 meters distance there. And where that comes from in the code is 3319, the last sentence in that article. There's that 6 meters right there. Okay, and so now to the purpose of this video is let's figure out, can we have that stairs open? Okay, so overall, like the exiting strategy seems to work. So let's see what we can do here. And now to check this, we're going to go to section 328, which is mezzanines and openings through floor areas. So basically, if we do that stair open, assuming that our floor that it's going through, that stair is, say, a fire separation, then we have an opening through a floor area or through a floor assembly. And so sentence one here in 3281 pretty much says, except as permitted by some other articles here, the portions of a floor area that do not terminate an exterior wall, a firewall, or a vertical shaft shall terminate at a vertical fire separation having a fire resistance rating, blah, 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 blah. So what that's basically saying is that, that you're going to have to, any portion of the floor that don't terminate at, say, an exterior wall or a firewall or something like that need to needs to terminate at a vertical fire separation, so a wall basically. So this is essentially where a fire separation around a stair, for example, is coming from. It's basically coming from that idea that, well, the floor has to terminate at this vertical fire separation. It can't just be left open. But it goes on to say, or if you don't do that, if you don't have that vertical fire separation, that wall, it's got to be protected in conformance with the requirements of Articles 3283 to 3288. So this is a typical situation, say in a mall or in office buildings and things like this, where you have a second floor and you can look down onto the main floor, for example, or multiple floors. Those are called interconnected floor spaces, and essentially, the code starts off by telling you, no, you can't. You got to put that vertical wall in at that spot. But then it says, but if you don't do the vertical wall, you just got to meet these requirements here. So we'll just skip ahead. I'm going to skip this section here and just go to 3283 and see what some of those requirements are. So first of all, it says, okay, if you're going to have these interconnected floor spaces, let's just go to that definition. Interconnected floor space means superimposed floor areas or parts of floor areas in which the floor assemblies that are required to be fire separations are penetrated by openings. So that's exactly what we'd have here. We're to assume that the floor in this building right here is a fire separation. It probably is in this case. And we are going to penetrate it with an opening now. That's not going to have closures, okay? And it's not going to have the vertical fire separation around it. So in that case, okay, got to be sprinklered, fine. There's a requirement here for some vestibules. There's a requirement for draft stops. So often when you see an opening like this, you'll see usually it's glass, but a glass panel that rings the opening basically, and it's they got to be 500 millimeters deep, for example. And there's some mechanical requirements there, and so on and so forth. So there's a bunch of rules there, which you'd have to look through and make sure that you meet those rules, and then you could do that that interconnected floor space. But there's also exceptions to this, okay? Exceptions to special protection. So here's where I'm hoping that this stair ends up. And now you'd have to read through, all these sentences carefully to see which ones apply to you. Again, this is an exception to special protection. So the special protection is the 3283 to 3288. And if we go down to our sentence number 6 here, an interconnected floor space need not conform to the requirements of Articles 3283 to 3288, provided it consists of the first story and the story next above it or below it, but not both. Okay, so if we go back to our plan here, that's us. Okay, so we're connecting from the main floor to the second floor only in this case. Okay. Second item is sprinklered. So is the building sprinklered or not? And if so it pretty much has to be or not exceed some certain areas. So we'll assume in this case the building's sprinklered anyways, because typically these types of buildings are, even if they don't even have to be, they tend to be sprinklered just because you get better insurance rates or whatnot, but we'll assume it's going to be sprinklered. And then it has to be of certain groups and divisions basically. So Group A, Division 1, 2, or 3, D, E, F, 2, blah, blah, blah. So, this would be cafe would be an A2 in this case. So, our interconnected floor space need not conform to the requirements, those special requirements. Okay, so it could be done in this case without doing anything special. Okay, so the next thing, one would have to consider now that we've determined the stair is open is, let's just assume that this was closed off completely right here and the intent was not to have any access into there. I think there'd be a problem with that in this case. If this was a mezzanine to the main floor, then potentially you could get away with just having this egress stair, as long as you are able to travel from, the farthest point here down the stairs into an exit within a certain distance, and some other rules. But the problem is that this this space on the second floor wouldn't classify as a mezzanine. So if you read the definition of a mezzanine, it wouldn't be a mezzanine. So what one could look at here is if this is just another suite here, which essentially is what it is, could you get away with one egress from this suite? And so where that would take you in the code is 3315, and it starts off by saying, except for dwelling units, a minimum of 2 egress doorways are required from a suite. If you exceed some of the, if you're of this use or you exceed an occupant load of 60, I don't think that space would. If this is a sprinklered building, then the travel distance to the egress doorway is 25 meters, and whatever area we'd be looking at here, so EB Group A would be, you couldn't have more than 200 meters squared of that space, basically, so this area couldn't be more than 200 meters squared. And I think there'd be an argument to be had that if you can get away with one egress from this space, you could, as long as you met all those rules, you could say it's that way potentially. But I think it's a little bit gray in the code in that sense. And the part that starts to really become problematic is more this sentence right here, 3313, means of egress, sentence 8. Each suite in a floor area that contains more than one suite shall have a doorway into a public corridor. So this is a floor with multiple suites, so you need to have a doorway into the public corridor. And these acceptance permitted by these two sentences have to do with residential uses. And now the catch here is, okay, this kind of says we have to lead into a public corridor, and then it goes into 9, and that's where it says you have to be able to go in 2 directions. So you got a bit of a problem here in this case. Once you enter that public corridor, you can't actually go in 2 directions. You just go in 1 direction. So that's a bit of a problem. I think it's probably arguable that because people could still go this way, and it's small and all that kind of stuff, that it's probably something that could be relaxed. But, worst case scenario, maybe you just increase this space a little bit, and you put that door, as long as you don't reduce your corridor too much there. Looks like it's fine. And now this is arguable that if this was the egress door out of here, now you can go in 2 directions to an exit. So probably I would look at doing that just to be sure. Otherwise, I think it would be, from what I can see in the code, it's a little bit gray, taking the approach that I talked about, but it's certainly something that could be discussed with the plans examiners. And I think it's reasonable if you had a door here that you still have the option to go down, and you still have the option to go this way if you need to. It seems pretty safe for the size of the space and how many people would be in there, but I just can't seem to find an article that would support that 100%. So I think if you had this situation, and with this, then I think it's supported pretty well in the code. So anyways, that's a pretty interesting situation. I think there's no problems doing that open stair there, and I think that was a good overview of other exiting as a whole, kind of the approach to things. So that's all I had to say about that.